Scleroderma. If you know what it means, then chances are that you or someone you love has been diagnosed with it. But if you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Despite the fact that over 300,000 Americans are coping with this deadly disorder, it remains among the most misunderstood, misdiagnosed, and underfunded of autoimmune diseases. Scleroderma is a hard word to say, and it's a difficult disease to understand. It's painful, uncomfortable, and debilitating. An overproduction of collagen stiffens your skin. It gets into your hands, which involuntarily close up. It gets into your lungs, you can't breathe. It gets into your heart, and your heart stops beating. I learned all of this firsthand when my sister Karen was diagnosed several years ago. I watched as her body weakened and changed so dramatically, yet her spirit remained so strong. At one point, it was difficult for her to even walk down a hallway, although she didn't necessarily look sick, which makes this very complicated disease even more difficult to understand. In her case, the disease is concentrated in her digestive system. Imagine the agony of always having to worry about eating, elimination, and getting enough nutrition. It can make daily life nearly unbearable, yet at the same time she was diagnosed, scleroderma was a relatively unknown disease. Many doctors were not even aware of its existence. Unfortunately, not much has changed since then, and there remains a lack of awareness of this disease even today. Early recognition of scleroderma can be difficult because the symptoms are so much like other autoimmune diseases. It can take 3 to 5 years to even be diagnosed. The cause of scleroderma is still a mystery. But with the help of the Scleroderma Foundation, research is being done to find the cause and a cure. Please take a few minutes to learn about this disease from some truly special people whose lives have been forever changed by this disease and by the Scleroderma Foundation.
When scleroderma hit, all of a sudden I found myself having maybe 2 good hours a day. And everything takes me so long. I can't possibly do my job anymore. I can't work on a computer. As you can see, they don't move. And I can't grasp things. I can't cut anymore. Eating is very difficult.
I lay in bed and cry sometimes at night and say, why? Especially when my kids were little and, you know, you're trying to bathe them. Like just putting lotion on a baby is a difficult task because your hands aren't straight.
Abby and I were playing a game sitting on the floor, and she made a good move and I said thumbs up, and she did thumbs up, and she couldn't close her hands into a fist. So we said, that's unusual.
I was diagnosed with scleroderma when I was 11 years old. We didn't know what that was or what we were going to have to do about it.
During my time in art school, I started having these mysterious instances where it was actually onset of scleroderma, but I didn't know. Raynaud's phenomenon coming in, my hands turning pale white, I started getting the ulcers on my skin. I even had a couple of times where I completely just passed out, and I had no idea why, and no doctors could tell me why.
It came on quick. I lost a lot of flexibility in my body, and through that had to relearn how to write and hold silverware and dress myself.
It's relatively rare, and so most doctors have never had a patient with it, and they don't know about it, so they don't diagnose it.
I wasn't really sure what to think at first, but like when we started going to the doctors, I felt kind of scared.
Unfortunately, for scleroderma patients, there's no treatment. So I was treated symptomatically for all the things that were wrong with me, but it didn't cure my scleroderma. There is no cure.
There's a lot of pain that goes along with it, mental and physical anguish.
It was pretty scary to realize that this is something that she's going to have to deal with the rest of her life.
Life changed pretty dramatically. I started to have to figure out new ways of doing things. One of the chief things was that as the Raynaud's was taking my fingers and as my hands were tightening up, it got harder and harder to draw like I had normally done. So I pretty much had to retrain myself to use other parts of my body, and I use a lot of my shoulder in a lot of the movements.
Looking at me, you probably don't realize also all that I cope with along with my hands. I have very compromised inner organs, and so walking is difficult for me. A couple of blocks, I start struggling. I used to work out. I can't do that anymore. There's a lot of things that I used to do and I physically can't do anymore. I used to play piano since I was 5 years old. That hobby ended. Losing my career was a huge issue for me because that was really a large part of my identity.
Scleroderma has taught me to find a lot of things in my house that I can't live without. I have little gadgets that open cans for you. If I'm driving and I'm thirsty, I can't just go in the gas station and get a bottle of pop or a bottle of water because I can't open it. Things in my cupboards, if I can't reach, I'll take the bread knife, the longest one, and I'll use it, grab hold of it.
When I go into the store, if an item is on the top shelf, I probably can't buy it because I just can't reach up to get it. If an item is very large, I can't grasp it. I tend to grasp things with my wrists because that's the only place that I can actually hold on to something. Well, it's a pretty slippery slope because things drop very easily from your wrists. Well, then as I move on to the freezer section, now that's an ordeal. The freezer, because it's so cold, that's the first problem. My hands get very, very cold, and that compromises my circulation even further. Generally, things in a freezer are higher, and so I sometimes have to step inside the freezer on the bottom shelf and reach up as best I can to reach an item. So I try, but if I can't, or I think it's going to be too risky or dangerous, I'd have to ask somebody else.
The one thing I would change with my scleroderma would be to have my hands back, because you use your hands for everything, everyday life, driving, getting dressed, buttoning your shirt, everything. You take your hands for granted.
Scleroderma is a tough thing, but it's the everyday that you've got to keep focused on. What you can do that day, and then going on to the next day.
It really helps to have another physical person to be able to lean on as much as possible. Don't try to tackle this illness by yourself. It's not an isolated thing. And that's what the chapter is here for, to provide some sort of an outlet for patients to not have to tackle this alone.
It's such a rare disease that you wouldn't know someone that has scleroderma. So you depend on the foundation to meet these other people, to talk about your issues, to talk about any solutions that people have found that work for them, to talk about their medical care, what's worked for them, what hasn't.
And they'll say, hey, my friend's daughter was just diagnosed with scleroderma. And I say right away, give her my number, have her call me.
There's definitely this sense that I have a limited amount of time. Obviously, it does, for the most part of people, shorten their lives. I want to try to do as much good for others who are going through similar circumstances as I can while I have the tools to do it. And, if every individual who has this disease were just to make that determination that they're going to help others around with it, it feeds your soul, it gives you a reason to keep on going, and it makes life a lot easier to live.
Hi, I'm Barry Sanders. Scleroderma is a horrible disease that ravages the lives of its victims and their families. I know firsthand because it ended the life of my sister Nancy at the age of 26. It devastated my family and left us with so many unanswered questions. I still think about her often, and I wish that more research were being done to end the suffering from this disease. Scleroderma can come from anywhere and affect anyone at any time. It changed my life, and it can show up on your doorstep and affect your life or the life of someone you love too. Don't just stand on the sideline. Please get involved and help us to win the fight to cure scleroderma. There are many ways you can help. Create awareness, be an advocate, donate, volunteer. Take the first step by picking up the telephone and calling the Scleroderma Foundation and learning more about how we can help get closer to finding a cure.